What's going on, you loyal listeners? Thank you for tuning in to the L Squared podcast. I'm your host here, Luke Larson, and joining me today is a very special guest, a different, lovely, and loquacious special guest, the writer, director, producer of the new film, Rosie, coming to the South Dakota Film Festival this year, Tessa Germaine. Thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
Yes, I'm excited to talk to you. I just saw your film, Rosie, and it's so good.
Oh, thank you.
It's so good. It really is. And I'm always curious, could you kind of talk about what your inspiration was for making this film?
Yeah, so back in high school, I learned about the real Rosies, the Rosie the Riveters who worked during the war, and I was so fascinated by these women. And of course, we all know the We Can Do It poster with the strong arm. And I kind of went on a research binge. I was just Googling it like crazy to find out the story behind this poster. And I discovered there wasn't one. There's theories of who was the inspiration for it. Originally, it was Geraldine Huff Doyle. But then we found out it was this woman, Naomi Parker, who was in a photo that may have inspired the poster. But that can't be proven because the artist passed away. He has no literature written about it and no descendants. So It's just this untold story. And I thought there was so much potential with that to take this like iconic character and this iconic image and put a story behind it that's fictionalized but based on the real experiences of real women from the war. So that's what I really set out to do.
Yeah, it was fascinating and gripping, very well made. I'll read the synopsis here for the listeners. So, factory worker Rose Donnelly must stand up for her female coworkers when their supervisor ignores blatant harassment and refuses to treat them as equals to their male coworkers, based on the We Can Do It poster by J. Howard Miller. And it's just so good. And it's obviously super relevant for right now too. And it's easy to kind of think like, oh, this was the 40s and it was back then, and that stuff
back
doesn't
in the day.
Yeah, it doesn't happen anymore, right? But unfortunately it's happening right now, and it happens every day. And in fact, it happened, I was in a situation where something like this happened at my previous job, and
really?
I ended up leaving because of it.
Wow.
It was me and my friend and I, but we worked at this company together, and we were both doing the same job. We both got promoted at the same time, and it got to the point where we kind of, through talking, realized that I was getting paid more than she was. And we were like, that doesn't seem right, especially for, I don't have to get into all the details, I guess, but the way I got the pay raise was just kind of like asking for it. It was like a no, like, I was kind of like, yeah, da-da-da, and they're like, yeah, okay, no problem. I was like, all right. And so I was like, oh, well, just go talk to him, because they did it for me, no problem. And she did, and all of a sudden it was the biggest deal in the world, and they wouldn't do it. And so we knew that something was coming along and that they would have an opportunity to write this. And when that came about, they didn't, and they kept it the same. And I went to HR about it, and they said, hey, I'm just gonna delete that email you sent me and pretend like you didn't say anything.
Oh my God.
And so she went and tried to talk to him, and they told her to leave if she didn't like the job. And so we left. And
wow. Well, good for you for standing up for her as well, and like doing your part in this situation, because not everyone would, unfortunately. The fact that you both left is really powerful and shows a lot of character in both of your parts.
Yeah, and it was tough, I know, and she didn't need me to stand up for her, she did that on herself. But, it was just kind of like, to me, it's the most important thing is like, to me, are people's rights and just doing the right thing at any cost. And even was like, well, the uncertainty of I'm going to leave, you know, this job because of it. And it worked out great. I mean, we're in much better positions now where we're a lot happier at a different, you know, different company.
That's good.
But it's just like this kind of stuff. It's not compartmentalized. It's not in the past. You know, it's happening right now. And I think it's just so important because the only way we can get past this kind of stuff as a society is to keep shedding light on it and keep talking about it and not put it in the corner and say like, well, that kind of stuff used to happen, you know, or like that was back in the day, you know, it's different time now. But or the opposite of like, okay, we'll do the female movie, we'll have it female led. All right, we got this one. Okay, now we can get back to the normal stuff.
Oh, I know.
You know? And even like I was doing the dishes the other day, and I started listening to an old Boris Karloff record, and it was just like him narrating like old Universal, you know, those old monster movies, and he would like set up a clip, and they would play an audio clip from one of the movies, and he would talk about it, and it was just like old cheesy fun or whatever. But even when they were getting to Frankenstein that Boris Karloff played, he was like, based on the novel written by coming from the mind of the young female mind of Mary Shelley. Just started like, can you believe it? A woman thought of this. Like I was just like, why do you even have to throw that out there? I mean, it was
stuff like that makes my blood boil.
Yeah, I know. It's really hard, but the Rosie the Riveter has stood as such an empowering figure and an inspiration, you know, to a lot of people. And you said that you heard about the Real Rosies program in high school. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I refer to them as Real Rosies, and these are women who were actually working during the war, whether it be at a shipyard or a factory, or many of them had to like become cooks on boats and do all sorts of things. They had to work in their husbands' butcher shops. They had to just take up every job that men were leaving behind. So it's a very broad term, but I started hearing about the stories of Real Rosies, and it's amazing. So if you look online, you can find like the Real Rosie Project, which was done through NYU, and they recorded all these women talking about their experiences during the war. And so that's what kind of intrigued me, is how these women actually never questioned if they were capable of doing this. They just said, we have to, so let's go do it. And then afterwards, they were like, wow, I never realized all the things that I was capable of doing. Nobody told me I could do all these things.
Yeah.
And after that, they had the bug. They're like, I can't just go back to being a nice wife and mother in the home. Like some did, and some were happy to do that, which was great. But there were plenty who were like, I want to keep working. And obviously, we only had 20 minutes to tell this story, so we couldn't go further and further into the history. Sure. But unfortunately, after the war ended in 45, and I think in 44 is when it really started, the men were coming back. And they told the women, all right, get out, leave. Yeah. We don't need you here anymore. And it was very hard for women to find jobs that weren't as hairdressers or in salons. Yeah. So, but that was kind of like a feminist movement that a lot of people don't talk about. It's not really labeled as that. But that's when women realized that they were worth more than men had told them they were. And that's what really started this next generation of younger girls who went into the workforce because their moms did it. They watched their mothers do it. And I think that like heavily influenced the movements in the 70s and the 80s, which is when the We Can Do It poster actually became famous. Because that poster wasn't actually an icon during the war.
Interesting.
Yeah, a lot of people don't know this, but it was just up in the Westinghouse Electric Company factory for 2 weeks. And then it was gone. But sometime in the 80s is when people were looking through like old, propaganda posters and stuff through the libraries, and they found this one, and they're like, wow, this is a great poster. And they started using it for the feminist movement. And that's how it became like the icon that we know it today.
Wow. Yeah, and it's interesting just to hear that they all of a sudden had this autonomy, and you hear those, I'm sure that there were women who I've heard stories where they like got apartments together, and they would like,
Yeah.
one would work a night shift and one would work a day shift, and then they would like watch the kids, and they're all of a sudden like, yeah, like you said, we can do this. Like, oh, this is nice. Like we don't have to worry about like being pigeonholed and only doing, one or two things, and we can really support ourselves and support our family. And I think that's
Exactly.
great.
And what's really interesting is so in Richmond, California, there's the Rosie the Riveter Trust and a national museum. And it's a big shipyard there that a bunch of Rosies worked at. And I went up there last August for their Rosie the Riveter rally and got the chance to meet some real women who worked during the war.
Oh, wow.
And it was amazing talking to them about like their experiences and what happened to them like during and after the war. Many of their stories I ended up like utilizing in the picture. And of course there were many more I couldn't, and I wish I could have. But something that really stuck with me is one woman said, when I got my first paycheck, I didn't even cash it. I framed it and hung it on the wall because I had never earned my own money before, and I loved that feeling.
Wow.
And that just stuck with me so much because I remember being like, I don't know, 17, 18, getting my first real paycheck from like a hard labor job. And it just feels so satisfying. You're like, yeah, I worked all that time and here it is. Usually, sometimes it's a little depressing depending on the check. But the fact that for them, that was something that they never even considered, Yeah. They didn't think they could be the breadwinners. And there it was right in front of them. Wow. So that always just really stuck with me.
Yeah, that's powerful. So have you ever worked in a factory? Have you ever done like factory work before?
No, I had no experience working in a factory. Ironically, so while we were filming the movie back in February, I pretty much pulled every favor ever owed to me from everyone in my life and had them as extras or borrowed supplies. Like, it was really a community project to make this film happen. And my amazing grandmother was an extra in the film, and she was on set every single day. She even bought her own costume. She is a star.
Wow.
And she was talking to all the other extras and all the girls on set in the back while I'm running around doing stuff. And 3 different people came up to me and they were like, oh, so is this inspired by your grandma? I'm like, my grandma's not that old, you guys. She wasn't in World War II. Don't say that to her face. And they're like, no, because your grandma worked in a factory and she was sexually assaulted like Rose was in the film. I was like, wait, what? Oh, also spoilers for anyone who hasn't seen the movie yet. So sorry. Watch it with the South Dakota Film Festival. Shameless plug. But, Rose gets slapped on the ass when she's walking through the factory, and that is a very humiliating thing that unfortunately many women in my life have gone through. But my grandmother never shared that with me. She shared it to every stranger on set, but she never told me. She worked in a factory for a very short period of time, and her boss did that to her at an event in front of everyone, and it was mortifying, and she ended up quitting not too long after that. She didn't like the job anyway. And then after that, it was just really hard to stay there, feel so disrespected. But I was just shocked because I never knew that side of her. I never knew that history in her life. And the fact that the film touched her enough that she felt open to share it with everyone was just, it made my heart soar. But no, to answer your question, no, I don't have factory experience. I worked in a grocery store. I've worked at a boba tea shop. I've worked on film sets. And that's pretty much
that's about it.
But I do know people who have worked in factories, so they were helpful to me.
Yeah, very much. I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I think you're much better suited behind the camera.
Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I worked at UPS for a couple years loading trucks and stuff, and I liked that job a lot, but there were not a lot of women working there. I mean, unfortunately, there was like, I think 2 or 3 at a time out of like 50 to 60 people on one shift. I mean, and I don't know, I can't really speak for how UPS recruits, but I know I heard like when people were starting, they were kind of like, when it was a new girl, they would be like, well, now you got to be able to lift 70 pounds. Can you lift 70 pounds? All right, well, maybe you're not going to make it, and really, but the ones that stuck it out, showed. But either way, working at a factory is not fun. So like, at the end of the day, it's like the fact that they were able to work and had to work these shit jobs, but even that, they were like just so proud and for the opportunity just to, like we said, support themselves and support their family. And the fact that it's hard to even think about that businesses were like, that they just didn't want workers in there, good workers, would just turn people away.
What's amazing too is like for the women during the war, when they started in the factories, that actually opened up a lot of educational avenues for them as well. Some of them started studying engineering. Others were taking like drawing classes, and they started working on building plans for ships and for planes and different types of maps and everything. So, and that's what I've heard from some of the women up in Richmond as well, that they went and they ended up taking college classes and learning these higher skills so they could even grow. And I thought that was really fantastic because women were starting to go to college in the 40s, but it wasn't as common. And so the fact that they were like utilizing this time, they're like, oh, okay, this is really cool, but I want to do that thing, which is even better. So I'm going to go take these classes and I'm going to get better so I can help out more and contribute even more to the war effort.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Wow. Yeah, that's great. So what were some challenges in producing this film and making it come to light?
Oh,
any at all?
So many. I think every independent filmmaker, of course, runs into the money aspect of producing something like this, especially since this was such a large-scale project. I think challenge number 2 would be recreating a World War II aviation factory.
I was very impressed by that. Yeah, it looked great.
Thank you.
Yeah.
There, of course, are those like few things that I still notice, and I'm like, those like really like nitpicky people who know everything about that era are gonna see this. But what can you do? It was technically a student film, so like, cut me a little slack. But that was definitely a huge challenge. We had to do a ton of research into everything as small as like the fabric used in the wardrobe, because there were so many materials that people couldn't use for common clothing, so they needed them for military uniforms. On top of that, we had to like get a bunch of military uniforms for our big dance sequence. eBay was a big help. I still have most of them. If anyone is looking for a World War II uniform, they don't fit most men these days, but I have them. So a lot of things like that. And of course, being a student production too, finding a lot of background actors is very hard because I was fortunate enough I was able to pay my lead actors a little bit. Because I think it's very important to pay your actors, since they're the face of your movie. They're putting their heart and soul onto a screen for other people to see, and they're giving up their time to help make your project possible. So I have a huge respect for actors, but unfortunately I had no money for my background. So again, I pulled a lot of favors. Pretty much everyone in that dance sequence is like my friends from high school, from college, everywhere, pulled into it. And a lot of them brought their own costumes too, which was really nice.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but so there's a lot of little challenges like that. I unfortunately did run into a situation where there was a male professor at my university who will be unnamed, but he was adamantly against us making this project. And
Really?
he actually got my first production designer to quit.
Whoa.
Which I understand. She had her other reasons, and like it was not her time, and I totally respect her for that. And I ended up with Hannah, and I love her to death. She was the most amazing production designer. However, he never even met me. Doesn't even know what I look like. Never had a face-to-face conversation, and he was going above my head to the staff, trying to get them to put an end to my project.
Wow.
And that was it. It was a really hard pill to swallow, to think that someone had so little faith in me when they never even had a conversation with me. Because I wasn't living in the clouds about making this project. I knew it was going to be a lot, and my producer and I were already working on getting like the authentic riveting guns and figuring out how to do our builds. And I found a costume designer at FITM to be a part of this. So it wasn't like I was just like, yeah, it's all going to come together in the end, like a lot of students might be like. But we ended up proving him wrong, which was good. And the rest of the staff at the school was a little scared. But once we showed them that we had a plan and what we were doing, they were on board with it, and they were very supportive. So
that's awesome. Well, kudos to you for getting through it. And
thank you.
Turned out a great product. I mean, it's really, really good. And I'm so excited that people are going to have the chance to see it. So is there a place that the people can follow along to see when the next time they'll be able to see the film is?
Yes, we're on all the social medias. You can follow us on Facebook or on Instagram at Rosie the Film, no spaces. And we also have a website. So we are setting up a blog right now. So we'll be talking about South Dakota Film Festival. And we also just got into Calabasas Film Festival.
Oh, congrats.
Thank you. So we're hoping to have like a long, good festival run.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, best of luck with all that. And for the loyal listeners, you can see this live, southdakotafilmfest.org from September 17th to the 26th, extending it out an extra week, more films. And I'm really excited for everybody to go out and see them, especially this one. And Tessa, you did just such a great job, and thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And you can find us on Twitter at Luke Larson89 for me, at the podcast at L Squared Podcast on Twitter, on Instagram at L2 Podcast on Facebook. We're on Spotify, on YouTube. Check us out. Hit us up. We'll have all your information about the other films coming to the South Dakota Film Festival, and we're so excited. So thanks again, Tessa.
Thanks.